Welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining another session of Romania Power BI and Modern Excel User Group. This is our 13th meetup. Actually, we're entering the second year of Romania Power BI and Modern Excel User Group. Today is a special day because we have the first Romanian guest as a speaker. Thank you, Cristi, for your availability to present, and I'm really happy that ROPAG is the first public meetup presentation for you. No pressure. I'm sure many more will come, and the community overall will learn a lot from your great experience. For our newest members, my name is Cristian, and I will be your host today. We will have some few slides at the beginning, and then I'll present the next meetups. Then we'll see Cristian's feature presentation. We've planned a live Q&A in the end, but Cristi will tell us whether he wants to have it in the end or during the session. And then just before wrap up, we will be running the monthly Enterprise DNA raffle. I'll tell you more details about it in a bit. And then we will wrap up. Roughly, the entire session will be approximately 1.5 hours. Only some organizational stuff at the beginning. Please make sure that your microphone is muted during the session, during Cristi's presentation, and your video is turned off. If you have some burning questions, please type them in the chat. You can use the chat, and it would be much easier for us to spot them if you put a queue in front of them. If you have problems with the internet connection, please drop off and join again. This is valid also for me. The Teams is still recording the meetup, and please be informed that the meetup is recorded and it will be uploaded on YouTube as soon as everything is ready. In terms of next meetups, we will have one also an online meetup on the 31st of March. I don't have the final confirmation yet. This is why I don't want to say anything about our guest. It will be a surprise, but it will be a very nice surprise, I'm sure. And then the next one in April, we will have again another Power Query session with the one and only Alex Powers from Power BI CAT team. He told me that he wants to have as many sessions on M and Power Query this year as he can, because I was asking whether he could do an external tool session or something else, and he told me, you know, I love Power Query, so Power Query will be. Okay, I said, thank you. Next thing that I told you that we'll speak about, it's the Enterprise DNA raffle. We are very proud to have Enterprise DNA as the primary official sponsor since August last year. Enterprise DNA is offering on each live meetup 3 full annual Enterprise DNA memberships, which are now including the Analyst Hub, with a roughly value of $1,500 per month. And this will be distributed at the end of this meeting with a raffle that will run. And participating in this raffle will be done only by filling up this form. Please scan the QR code or get the URL. Don't worry if you don't have enough time to do it, because I will paste the link in the chat during the session. Even if you are not participating in the raffle, please fill up the form and provide feedback so we can improve future meetups. And with this, let's come back to this session where we have Cristian Prifti. Cristi is actually a friend of mine, and we've met in Power BI community during this pandemic period. We first met at the Guy in a Cube weekly live stream, and then here at Romania Power BI user group and Saturday morning learning group. This is what I love about community, because we get to meet great people, like-minded people, and even if we've never met in person yet, we are planning to have an in-person session in autumn, if COVID will let us. And hopefully we will be able to meet Cristi even before autumn, even for a small talk and some beers.
Definitely.
Cristi is a Power BI certified data analyst, and he's the business intelligence manager of a multinational company, having a lot of experience working with data since many years. He's coming from the real world, where data is never in the best shape for analysis. Cristi he worked a lot with Power Query, and he's here to show us a few tips and tricks and the real magic of Power Query custom functions. Cristi, thanks again for accepting my invitation and the challenge, because I know it was a challenge. Please tell us a few words about you, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Cristi. And I actually thank you for giving me the chance and taking the risk with me today. Now, besides what Cristi said, summing it up, I've been working with reporting processes, I think, for the past 8 or 9 years. When I initially started, it was all about Excel and VBA. This was the things you could play around. Now, I moved over towards the Power BI side, I think somewhere around 2017, towards the end. And besides the Power BI itself, what I did fall in love was actually the Power Query, since I honestly can say that I like more than the actual Power BI visuals themselves. I think that comes from the downside of seeing what Power Query can do, which on VBA I did had to work some days to actually get the same results. Now, I'll share my screen, and I hope you can all see it.
Yes, it's visible.
Now, I said for today, I'm actually going to keep everything within Power BI, so also my own presentation sits in Power BI. Besides what Cristi said, just to add a few things about me, I'm a football fan, so I'm dragging on the legacy that Nicola left in after the last meeting. I am a dog lover, and I do have a Labrador which sits with me in the room currently, and I do actually love working with data. Even if Cristi said I did have to work throughout the years with many structured or semi-structured, or call them however you want to, ugly files. Now, the file that we are going to work on today is actually going to be shared. I've also put in some reference link about some of the things that we will talk about today. And since we do have also Melissa, without her knowing that she starts the list of reference topics people can actually go and look at, and we are ending the list with her. I wanted to get grounded on a real scenario that we can actually start to work on. So let me just go to a file. I'm just going to open a retail file, which I think was also from the Enterprise DNA challenge. And I played a little bit with it to simulate a real life scenario. So we have one or multiple files that we are going to receive weekly. Each file will have one or more worksheets. And I can expect on the same worksheet to have different structures. At least in terms of, on this one, you can see that I have the headers right here. If I zoom in a bit, on the next one, I will actually not have any kind of blank rows. Now we are going to, throughout the session, to actually see how we can actually achieve by writing a custom function to treat those files for us. so that it makes our life easier. Now, starting with why Power Query custom functions are actually nice. And I will start off with the fact that in case I see a repetitive pattern in my data, working on multiple reports, instead of actually always going through the same steps on and recreating them for each file that I would need to use that set of data, I can actually write a custom function once, then I could actually then reuse. So it's the magic of, besides being able to support me, it actually reduces also my cycle time to actually develop something, because I know I've worked with that report, I know I had a custom function there, I can actually go grab it, and that will actually do the data cleansing for me. Now, let's open and go to where we'll spend the complete session today. And I will try to zoom in a bit more. So before we get started, we'll have 3 main topics today, and depending on the time frame, we'll see if we can look into some more. We'll first check on how we can actually create a simple custom function so that we get the basic right and understand how we will actually write it. Then we are going to look into the real life scenario that we just looked at, where we do have multiple files with multiple worksheets on each file. And then we will actually look on what actually happens for us when we go and click the combine button for loading multiple files. After each of the 3 chapters, we will actually stop for questions. So whenever you have some doubts or you want to ask something, you can just leave the question. After we finish that respective chapter, we will actually look on into the chat and go back to the questions. Now, how do we write a custom function? I think that's the most basic thing that we will start with. And let's say we want just a simple, very basic, simple function where we just want to multiply a number and multiply it with a number 2. I just took a random example. So in order to create a custom function, I'm actually going to go on the new source, and then I will click on a blank query. What I would need to do now is I'll need to go to the advanced editor to actually see the code. Now you see the normal procedural steps that Power Query generates. Now, what's the difference between this code and the code of a custom function comes from the fact that on the custom function, we'll actually need to have an input. So for us to have actually a custom function, we'll need to tell him, okay, if I have an input, what is my input that I'm actually going to require? In our specific case, I will just simply delete everything for now from the page, and we'll start with our input. Our input is going to be the number that we are going to provide it, which is going to be multiplied by 2. Now, so that we declare the input, we are going to open and close the brackets. We are going to give it a name. And for now, we are just going to leave it as such. And then we are telling him what he's going to need to do. Now, I will have a 1-line code, so I will not declare the normal procedure. And let me call this one input number. Then let's say we are going to tell it input number multiplied by 2. So it's our basic thing that we will start with. I wrote it, I will click on OK. Let's try it out. How can I try it out? The most basic thing, I can just type in the number and I will hit the invoke button. The moment I did it, he's going to show me the result 4, which is correct. Now, if you think it's normally that easy, you might be wrong. We still need to take care of some things. When we declare an input, our input can be a specific data type, or we can accept any kind of input. Now, accepting any kind of input would actually be a mistake, because I can have cases where, for example, let's see what happens if I write an alphanumeric value, I'll invoke it, and he's going to throw me an error. Now, I can go back, I'll delete this one, I'll go back to the custom function, and I will actually declare what my input number will be. So my input is going to be a number. So I'm going to declare it as number. And what you need to keep in mind, the custom function can have a data type for the input and a different data type for my output. So after I close up the bracket declaring my input, I can actually go back and say also my output of the function is going to be a number. If I'm going to click now on done, I'm going to see that over here, and I think my screen sharing was hijacked.
Yeah, I don't know who.
It doesn't matter.
It's working again.
We just hijacked it back. Now, as you can see right here now, and I'll go to the input, you'll see that on the example now, he's going to show us what he actually expects. Now, let's see what happens the moment we are going to type an alphanumeric value, we are going to get an error, so we can't invoke the function anymore. If we are going to go into the error function right here on the end, we are going to see he's actually asking us for a number value.
Happening again. I don't know why.
I guess somebody wants to show us something.
Yeah. I'll try to check the settings whether I can stop allowing everyone, but please don't interrupt, Christine.
I do hope I didn't bore people so much that they're hijacking already the screen sharing. Okay. Now we've seen how we can control it. Now let's come up with a real life scenario. So I have the sample numbers list table right here. Now I would write the custom function so that if my number is actually above 1000, he's actually going to multiply it by 1.5. If it's below 1000, then he's actually going to multiply it by 2. And now let's go back to our function. Since we are going to have a procedure right now, we are going to not have anymore our one-liner. We are going to have the need to declare it. We are going to have our input number. Now, on the next step, I need to declare what I want it to do, so we'll give it a name. And we'll call it check category. Category, we are just going to check if my input number is going to be above 1000, then he's actually going to multiply it with 1.5, else it's going to be a 2. And let me also zoom in a bit. Now, we have two options. I could write here a second statement if I also put a comma sign after the previous row. On the result, I could say that my check category is actually going to get multiplied by my input number. And then I will actually return the result. That's one way through which I can write it. Now, if I don't want this additional step right here, what I'm actually able to do in my result of the function on the return part, I can actually do the multiplication directly there. So that's up to you on how you actually want to. I would normally prefer to have it written like we had before, where we just had the result and then doing it and returning the result, but it's a matter of preferences because both ways will actually work. Now we wrote our first function and we are going to give it a name. Now I actually want to go and use it because right now we played with it by invoking it. Now I want to use it in a real life scenario where I do have data in a table. Now, how do we do this? If I'll go over here to the add column. So on the tab for the add column, I do have the option to invoke the custom function. I can click on the invoke custom function. I'll need to give it a name. And now we are going to select our function that we just created, which was the multiplication fx. Now he's asking me where do I actually get to take the input? And you can see that I have two options right here. One would be for me to type in the number. We don't want this. We actually want the column. So I'm going to leave it with this icon right here, which lets me select the column that I want to use as an input. And he actually selected right since we only have one column. Now I'm going to click on OK. And we can see that it actually works as we did wanted it, because if I'll be able to compare the first two rows, so let's say this one, I see that it multiplied it by 2. On the last two rows, I do see that he multiplied it by 1.5. So the function actually works as we want. Now, this is our first part where we do actually come and write our first basic function. I will stop now and check in case we do have any questions, but I don't think we have. But in case somebody wants to ask something, feel free to actually either unmute or type it on the chat.
Nothing.
I do have a question.
Please.
Please.
I'm not sure if I'm audible, but I do have a question. Is it possible to use this function in Excel as well?
Yes, so that was my bad. I did mention it from the beginning. Everything that we see today around the custom function can actually be leveraged either within Power BI, either within Excel, or if you want, this can actually go up to the Power BI service in case you want to use it, for example, as part of data flows. How we can actually do it, and I will just showcase it quickly. Let's say this is the function that I would actually want to move over to my Excel. I'm just going to open up. I'll go to data, I'll go to launch the Power Query editor. So let's say I would want to copy the same function that I did create it in Power BI. I'm just going to control copy it. And I hope you also did copy it, because he did not. And the moment I've actually pasted it, he's actually copying it over. The same is actually applicable for data flows if you want to take a look. So I can just go to create a data flow. If the Power BI service will cooperate a bit, we are going to define a table. We are going to scroll down to a blank query. And now over here, the same thing happens. We can Control V it, and that's actually going to copy it over. With one regards when copying the function, especially I've seen it for data flows. If I'll go now and compare the two advanced editors, and let me close this one. Okay, let's go back to our advanced editor within Power BI. The function that we wrote actually looks like this. Don't get scared when you are copying it over. For example, into the data flow. So if I'll go back, you'll see that there is a slight modification, meaning my function actually received its own additional function. This is why we have the two lets. So he's starting our function, he's declaring the input, then he's running the procedure, and then he's going to return us again our function value. So don't get scared if you see the two procedures running within each other. That's actually good. It's not something you did wrong. That's how it's meant to be. Ionuț, I hope this answers your question.
Really detailed explanation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, moving on to the real life scenario. So we played around, and now we need to actually also fix our data because the management wants the reporting. Now, I'll just go to the normal step that we might normally encounter while working, for example, with files which only have a single worksheet. So if I would know that my data only has one worksheet, I would be tempted to actually click on the combine button to actually take the files over and get the output in one table. In our specific example, this would actually be wrong because we know that we have multiple worksheets. That's first. And then second, let's say the fact that we have different structures beginning with the headers, that might be something that we can treat not the elegant way, but we could actually do it. But the fact that we have the multiple worksheets, that's our blocking point. So we are not going to spend our time to actually write multiple combines functions to actually take each worksheet. So let's see how we can actually do it. And the first thing that we did added was a custom column, which we can add from here. And we did say, if I will open it up so that I can also zoom in a bit, or not. Maybe this one day this will be actually fixed and we can zoom in, but you can see that we invoke the function which starts with the Excel workbook and we provided the binary content of the file. What this does, the moment we added it, I can see that if I'll hover over and click on it, I will actually see the content of that respective file. So I do see that I do have two worksheets and I can see them from the kind type. So over here, if I go to my next one, I would like to actually see that it only has one worksheet. Now we will expand it for now. And again, the moment we expanded it, here it has these two columns. One contains our worksheet level data. And I can make it easier because I can actually check the name also. So we want to also get the name. Now we also have the worksheet name so that we make it easier to understand. Now, if I'll go now over here, I will actually see that on the content of my actual worksheet, on this one, I have again the header gap. On the next one, I don't have any blank rows. On this one, I don't. Now, I can't rely on people actually following up a procedure if I tell them, because I would simply not trust them, even if they would promise that they would fix the files. So we need to do something to actually control it. So if I do have trust issues, I do need to write something to control it. And how do we do this? In order for us to write the function, we are going to need a sample on which we are going to write the code on. So what I did here was to reference. So if I'll go back, we are actually following exactly the same steps. We are selecting our columns, we are getting the content. So I just duplicated the previous table with only one difference. I did select a specific worksheet, and how I did this was from our table right here where we do have the data, I selected just the first table and I clicked on the table reference. This will actually drill me down into that specific worksheet that I want to look at. And our worksheet is actually going to look like this. Of course, and I hope I will not break it, but I'm quite sure that over here, I would be able also to do it by writing a 0, and that's actually going to take our first row from the table. So I don't need to hard code my sample. I can always leave it so it picks up our first row. Now, how do we control it? Because as I was saying, I don't know if I might have this time 2 rows, I might have 3 rows, I might have 5 rows, or I might have no blank rows. So in order for me to actually make it simple, I'll go to remove rows. I'll just add a simple command. The moment he generated me the code, now I can actually go here and replace the one with a certain condition to be fulfilled. Of course, I needed to iterate through the rows, so I'm going to select each. Now, what I want to tell him is he's going to remove my top rows until he finds the voice number string, because I know that's going to come in all of my files. So I'm going to write each column 1 is actually going to be different than my invoice number. The moment I actually activated the code, and I'll just zoom in a bit so that I can zoom in over here. This is the line that we actually wrote. What this line is actually going to do is he's going to loop through our initial rows until he actually finds that value. The moment he finds that value, he's actually going to stop. Now, the next step that we'll actually need to do is just get everything as headers. Of course, the moment we did this, Power Query is going to add for us the change type step that normally gets added for some of the columns for which he identified it. If I'll drag along, now we just need to also take care of the ones he did not, so that we make sure we covered it. And now I see that I did assign data types for all my columns. Now, the last two steps that I actually want to do, because we do have a recommendation, never load data in columns unless there is no other option for that. So we are going to go add a column, and we are going to tell it, no, we actually want to extract the time first as an additional column. I'm going to rename it invoice time. And then I'll select again the column. I'll just go on the transform function, or I can actually select it from here as a data type. Remember what we actually saw on the last session with Nicola, where he was mentioning that we need to be careful on how we assign the data types to not break the query folding. In our case, there's no query folding, but keep that in mind. And now we did create our code. So let's say there are no further steps that we actually want to take, but we need to actually make it as a custom function. Now I do see that I have an error right here, so to not waste the time and look into it, I'll just make it a string. And I'll replace the current step because I don't want it to remain as a number. You still see the error, but if I'll go on the previous step and then again on this step, it will actually refresh and then we'll see that the error is gone. Now we did assign and we did all the steps that we wanted. The question now is, how would we be able to transform this into a custom function? And the answer is actually quite simple. So in order to not destroy this one, I'm just going to duplicate it. I'll go into the advanced editor and remember what the difference was between actually being able to write the Power Query custom code, which was just a procedure like we see it on the screen right here. And writing the custom function, we needed the input so that it will actually run. And I realized I did a mistake, and I will tell you why. I kept on changing my staging URL table. Now the staging URL table I actually wanted to keep as such. I didn't want it to destroy it because I can always go back and debug it through my staging table. Now, what I did wrong is, besides doing the changes, I should have referenced it and continued selecting my worksheet. And you can see that right now I do have all the steps right here until I select the first worksheet. So how do we correct this one? Because this was my mistake. Good, we filtered it. This was the step where we did selected our first. Zoom in a bit. So this is what was the step on our staging table where we did selected it. our procedure should normally start with this row right here. Now let's fix it. I will remove this one. I will keep my source because the source I still want to link it to my staging table. I'm going to go to the staging for UI. And of course, now I need to pay attention because I've changed the order. I also need to make sure that I'm correcting it right here because I need to reference the previous step. Let's see that it works. And it doesn't. Let's see why. And it doesn't because on this one, I do need to go back after I selected the first worksheet. And I do need to delete all the steps until the end. This was supposed to be my staging table. I was not supposed to do any transformation on it. If I'll go back, you'll see that right now it works and it works until the end. Now, let's give it finally a name. And we are coming to the big step where we are actually going to transform it into a custom function. And we are going to call it input worksheet. The moment we added the input into it, I can click on done and you'll see that my icon right here actually got transformed into a function. Now, let's invoke it. So I'll go towards the end. I'll just go and invoke the custom function. Again, I need to give it a name. I'm going to select the function and I need to tell him which column he should actually look at. As you can see over here, I do have tables listed because my icon right here is actually set to table. Now we don't want this. We want it still to be a column name because our data will actually sit at the row level. So I'm going to click on the data and I'm going to click on OK. If I would be able to expand this one right now, I would see the columns that I actually have here. But let's say I will go back into my code and I'm randomly going to break something. So I'm going to call this one a wrong name just to see what happens. I'm going to our retail data where we invoked it and we have an error. And of course, he's telling me that he doesn't find the specific column on the changed data type because this is where I messed it up. Question is now, how do we go back to actually debug it? And that's the interesting part on it. So I'll just open the function again. I'm going to comment out my input. And I realized that I never actually linked it correctly. And on the source, we are going to link it back to our source. This was my mistake. So we are going back to our staging table. When we commented out the function, the input of the function, if I click on done, he's going to show me that I can loop through the steps, of course. And then I see where my error appeared. Of course, I can actually go back and correct it because now I know where I need to fix it. And I can go back, and what I don't need to forget right now is declaring the input, but also using it, because what I didn't do was to actually also invoke it. So on each of my 3 rows, he was still going back to the same table. I would have received the same table 3 times. But now what we did was our input worksheet was actually also mentioned into the source. And like this, I can actually click on done. He reverted it back to a function. And we can see that we still have an error. On one of the tables, we actually don't have a description, which is interesting, which means one of our files actually did not have one of the columns contained in our sample. If I'll go again on the description again. Now I'll go back to the file. Let's see which one this was. So we had the same issue in December week 1 and on December week 3. So it was the same one. Now I would have two different solutions possible for this. I could go back to our transform and I would avoid assigning the data types right here. This would be one of my solutions because the moment I did not assign the data types, it's not going to trigger me the error. Now, that still makes an amendment in terms of I need to make sure that my invoice number column will always be called the invoice number because we use it to actually remove the header blank rows. I remove this one right from right here. I'm going to again go to the change type. What I did was to link it back because I removed the in between steps, so I need to make sure that I'm linking it back to the correct step over here and over here. And I'm going to click on that. If we go back, now we see that we actually don't have any more errors over here. The next natural step now would be to actually simply just invoke the function and expand it, and we would be able to select all the columns that we actually want. So I will not use the prefix, I will still leave it like this because we want to see something right now. So what it actually did is within the same procedure, by using the custom function, we actually went into it and expanded all the three worksheets at the same time. And I think that's the magic around it, because in one go, by running one custom function, we will actually be able to load all the different worksheets of data that we need. Now, of course, now we need to assign the data types, but then our table would actually be ready for it. And I will stop now to see if we have any questions. And I see Christy wrote something on the chat also.
I was saying about the trick with the optional parameter when importing from Excel. Normally you are importing from Excel and you just go with the default, but Excel.workbook has two additional optional parameters. And the first one, if you put it as a null, you skip one step afterwards on promoting the headers.
Fair point.
And this is really cool and useful. Yeah, here, if you go on Excel.workbook, after content, just put a null. Type it, null. Okay. And check the preview of the data. You'll see the headers already promoted. See, on the preview down there. Now you have name, data, item, kind, and
that's actually
whatever.
the content of the worksheet, yeah.
Yeah, but if you go one more step,
yep,
and check the data itself, you should have the first row already promoted. It works very well with tables. And besides this, there was a raised hand from Ionuț. He had a question. Maybe you can unmute and ask it, Ionuț, now.
My apologies, my internet connection was really bad, and some things happened.
So you don't have a question for now?
Not at the moment.
Okay, thank you. If no other question, we can go on, Cristi.
Okay. Now let's go into our last example that most of the people, I think, in the user group today would be familiar with. We are going to get, let's say, a CSV each and every day. We'll need to make sure that we combine the data and we actually get the output in one single table towards the end, and then we actually see how to do it. Now, normally we would just click on the combine, and this would actually take us to the normal steps in which all the needed components would actually be generated. For today, we are actually going to do it by ourselves. So let's duplicate it. We are going to create a new group for it so that we don't actually get confused. And we go back to it. Now, in order for us to combine the data, the first element that we will actually going to need is a sample file which is going to act as a model for it. So how we can actually do it, if we would have multiple, we could select either the first one or any of them. How we actually select it with right click on the binary content, and we are going to add it as a new query. This actually selected that specific file that we appointed. Now that's going to be our sample file. Now, so that our sample file can actually be used further down the line. Yep, I got it. Now we should be happy. So that we can actually take it over and reuse it, we'll need to also have a parameter storing that detail. So what we are going to do is we are going to create a new parameter. And just to make sure that I don't get error anymore, I just remove the space. How will we actually do it? Now we know that our content type is going to be binary. And now I'm going to just simply select the sample file that we initially selected. Now, let's move it back to our category right here. And let's reorder them a bit. We have our sample file and we have the parameter which we can then further use. Now, what do we do so that we can actually create our function? So I'm going to reference. Somebody wanted to add something?
Hello?
Yes? Yes, we are hearing you. Anyhow, so
if you don't have a question, please stay on mute and let Cristi finish his portion of the demo, and we'll ask the questions when he's finishing. Thank you.
Now, from the parameter that we just created, we are just going to reference it. And the moment we referenced it, we are going to tell him that this is going to be our transform UI. In this one, we are actually going to do any kind of changes that we'll actually want to do. Now, we have the file where we are actually going to do changes. Now, we also want to create a function which is going to be linked to that respective table that we are going to play with, so that we have the function which will then reuse on all the other files. So we are going to create a function. So let me go back. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to the create function, which is actually right here on the bottom. And I'll need to give it a name. And we are going to call it HCSV so that we find it easier. The moment I did create the function, you are going to see that he created us the separated folder containing the elements that he used. I am going to also move the sample file in that same folder. Now, our data that we are going to have as an output still sits outside that respective folder. Now, how can we play with it? So I'm going back to the very last element we created where we referenced our transform sample. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to select the CSV because it's a CSV format. Now, the nice part, any change that we are going to do right now in the user interface, and it's important, it's actually going to be linked back to our custom function right here. So let's go and filter for the driver ID to be 1. And let me go back to the custom function and actually see what happens. The moment I want to go to the advanced editor, he's going to tell me that the moment I'm changing something, I will actually break the link between the function and my transform UI. So I need to be very careful to actually not break it, because I do want it that whatever I perform in the user interface to actually be taken over by the custom function. But if you don't want to open up the advanced editor, you can actually scroll in the navigation and I see that the filter that I just added was actually taken over by my function. So I can actually now start doing any kind of changes or transformations that I would want to this respective table, which are going to get inherited by my function. With a note that, and that's important, make sure never to update the actual function. So I will not change something in the actual function because that's going to break the link. And that's an important piece. Now let's go back to our table. And I'm going to select the first two columns and I'm going to remove all the others because I don't need them. I can go on to invoke the custom function. And he's going to ask me for the binary content. On the settings, I'm on the column name. And he automatically selected the only column which had binary content. The moment we click on it, if I'm going to preview my data, I do see that the data is actually in a good shape and I would be able to expand it. Now, there are certain elements that I've seen while working with the Transform UI, especially in the data flow set. Sometimes I've seen that I was actually by mistake changing something in the formula bar. Of course, this will actually not be visible directly in the custom function. So in case I do see a deviation in my custom function compared to what I have in the Transform UI, the most basic simple thing that I've learned, and I will really call it basic, I will just add any kind of step that I actually want. So I'm just going to filter it also on the race ID 1. And the moment I did it, he's actually going to go back to the function again and re-update it. But I've only seen this happening with in data flows. It never actually happened in the Power BI desktop. And now I will actually stop for questions while I will get my voice back.
There's nothing in the chat for now. Maybe someone has a question and can unmute. Meanwhile, until you are thinking of a question, I'm just reminding you that we will have the Enterprise DNA raffle in the end. For now, we have 7 participants, which is giving almost 50% chances of winning. So whoever wants to join in, there is still some more minutes to fill up the form.
Good. Now, these were the 3 main topics for today. Now, I've added into the there are still some examples that I added in the additional ones. If you want to take a look, those are some of the examples that I actually had to go through that came to my mind while working with messy data on the first one. For example, we needed to convert a specific string column into an actual value in minutes while having a different unit of measurement. So that was actually something that I had to deal with because I was having around 20 reports, which were all having the same type of user-friendly output.
I think this is a very interesting use case, and if we can do it in 10-15 minutes, I would do this one also.
Yeah, we can. I think I mean, it might look complicated. It's actually very basic.
Cool.
So now
start with the use case and go ahead.
The use case was actually coming from an operational monitoring system, which was supposed to actually create the visibility on the management side for whoever doesn't approve some invoices on time, because it did have a certain threshold. Now, in order for us to actually do it, we needed to do two things as steps to be able to extract something out of this column. We first need to get the actual numeric value out of it, and then we would actually need to assign and take out of it the unit that we have the value in. And the ugly part was that, as you can see, it wasn't even consistent, because sometimes you might have it with minutes, sometimes it was with minutes in a plural compared to the minute before. And the basic thing that actually came to my mind, and it actually worked, and I'm just going to open up the custom function, was get the column. From the column, we would actually be, and let me zoom in a bit, we would be extracting the numeric value. And then based on the numeric value, we would actually have an nested diff checking for the type of unit of measurement that we actually would want. And then with that, we would actually go in and multiply it and actually get our value in minutes directly. Now, even though it was only a 2 steps function, I did create it as a function because I had multiple reports used in multiple places coming with the same input. And I did need it so that I can actually treat it, because I will be honest, back then, I did not know to use data flows. So I did not know that I could load the data and then reuse it. I learned this 1 year after. And that's when I actually became a fan of the data flows, because of how you can actually go on and reuse the data on and on without doing the necessary transformation twice. Yep.
I think this is the main point that we should take from this session. For people lazy, I mean efficient like me, this session is pure gold. Do the work once and then reuse it. Don't do repetitive steps. And this is what the custom functions are actually doing, right?
True. And I think the most amazing use case, I will not talk about it because we need definitely more than 1 hour, comes from the replace values based on the mapping. Now, whoever wants to go and look at the example on the reference, you'll see that we have also the link to Miguel's blog article showing how this is actually done, because I did not wrote it, he did. I just reused it. And I think that was one of the most amazing functions that I used when working with really messy procurement data, for example. So it's really worth going into it. Any link that we actually put right here into the reference table, I do encourage everyone who wants to go into the custom functions, go on and read it at least once. And I did start it with Melissa's date table, extended date table, because I think that's the most common use case of custom functions. I don't know if people actually thought of it, but the moment you use the generation of the date calendar within Power Query, that's the most used use case of a custom function by far.
And Melissa's function, it's really, really cool.
It's amazing.
And reusable. Thank you for sharing it with the community, Melissa. Well, if anyone has questions, this is the time to ask them. And afterwards, we'll go to the raffle. Feel free to unmute and ask if any question.
Or I put everybody to sleep. I told you that's a possibility.
No way. It was a great session, and thank you very much for presenting it to us. It was great, and I told you, for me, this is pure gold. It's always good to work only once and then reuse it. So custom functions is the way to do it, and the actual use cases that you showed were really, really cool. Thank you for the session. Let's go now for a few minutes on the raffle and see how many people are registered already. Let's see. Let's press a refresh. So the raffle is going like this. All the data that are filled in the form are taken by Flow, Power Automate. Cristi, you are on mute. If you are talking, you are on mute.
No, I wasn't.
Okay. So the data from the form are taken with the Power Automate flow. They are written in a SharePoint list. And then I've built this Power BI report connected to that SharePoint list. And inside this Power BI report, showing the number of users, the total number of users and the participants in the raffle, plotting them on the map. Inside this report, I've built a Power App, which is also using a flow on the backend to randomize the IDs that you got on emails. One moment, just to make sure that everybody is registered. Save it, refresh again. Okay, we have 10 participants in the raffle, and let's go and run the raffle. I'm not using much this, no, not this one, the other one, right? This Spotlight. But actually, this is the Power App that it's, again, what? I make it smaller, so. Yeah, this is the one. It happened to me before that the flow didn't work, so I hope this time it will work. So let's choose the first winner. Veronica Flora is the first winner. Congratulations, Veronica.
Thank you.
Really cool.
Yes, thank you for
after,
the presentation. And
just after the meeting, probably tomorrow, I will send emails to everybody who is winning for the 3 winners to confirm your email addresses, and then I will forward them to Enterprise DNA. Now
sure,
that we have Veronica,
of course.
Let's choose the second winner. Annette. Congratulations, Annette. You're the second winner. Let's refresh the report and have the third one. Choose a random winner. It's thinking a bit too much, I think, right?
You are jinxing it now, you know, right?
Yeah. Let me refresh it. Curtis Gregson, finally. Congrats, Curtis.
Yep, thank you very much.
I'll send emails tomorrow to all 3 of you, and please reply as soon as possible so I can forward them to Enterprise DNA team. Again, Cristi, thank you for your presentation. It was really, really good. I think you nailed it for the first time ever public presentation. It was really cool. And
I hope so.
if anyone has any additional questions for Cristi or for me, this is the time, because afterwards I will stop the recording, but we can still stay on and unmute and open the cameras for some free chit chat after the session. So if there is no more question, thank you everybody for joining. Thanks again, Cristi, for presenting, and see you on the 31st of March on our next meetup.